adjourned. Okay, I will now call the planning board meeting to order. At this time, we will do our roll call. When your name is called, please say here or indicate your presence by raising your hand. William Roach. Joe Towns.
Here.
Tamara Lipscomb, here. Thomas Thompson.
Here.
Okay. James Motley is absent. Kia Mills.
Here.
And Charles Fagg.
Here.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay, adoption of the December 17th, 2025 agenda. Will someone move to accept our agenda for tonight?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All right. It has been moved and properly second. You ready for the vote? All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. No opposers. Approval of the minutes from October 15th, 2025. I'm assuming you all have read those. All right. Will someone move?
So moved.
Second? Second. All right. Has been moved and properly second that we approve our minutes from October 15th. Let's vote. All in favor, show right hand. Any opposers? All right, hearing none. First agenda items for consideration. Consideration of a text amendment request to amend Article 5, Section 2 of the Reidsville Zoning Ordinance to introduce a new permitted use for short-term rentals, docket number T 202505.
Okay. Staff is petitioning to amend Article 5, Section 2, the table of permitted uses and notes, to the table of permitted uses of the Reidsville Zoning Ordinance, to introduce a new permitted use short-term rentals. This new permitted use will be allowed by right in all residential zoning districts, as well as central business district that comprises the downtown commercial core. This amendment will also establish Note 45 for short-term rentals. Note 45 will provide the following development requirements for short-term rentals. Number 1, cooking facilities are not permitted in any bedroom. For the purpose of this ordinance, cooking facilities include any refrigerator in excess of 7 cubic feet, any stovetop on range that operates 220 volts electric service, any appliance that operates on natural gas, or any cooktop, whether integrated into a countertop or separate appliance, which contains more than 2 cooking surfaces or burners. This shall not prohibit cooking facilities within one-room studio short-term rental. Number 2, in residential zoning districts, short-term renters shall not utilize the premises for holding special events or gatherings. Number 3, for any multi-unit dwelling, no more than 50% or 8 dwelling units, whichever is greater, may be used for short-term rental in any single building. Number 4, every short-term rental operator shall maintain for a period of 3 years a list of all short-term rental lodgers staying on premises. Number 5, the zoning permit number authorizing the short-term rental shall be conspicuously posted on all advertisements for short-term rentals and the subject property. Number 6, on-site exterior advertising for short-term rental is prohibited. Number 7, short-term rental operators shall comply with all applicable state and local laws, including those relating to fire and building codes, smoke detecting and carbon monoxide detecting equipment, housing codes, and payment of taxes to appropriate governmental entities, including occupancy taxes. This text amendment request is consistent with the Reidsville Land Development Plan under Goal Number 1, a thriving downtown, and Goal Number 3, expanded housing options. There is a considerable need for redevelopment in downtown Reidsville. This amendment aligns with the Goal Number 1 by providing alternative development options for traditionally commercial areas throughout and adjacent to downtown. By allowing short-term rentals in Central Business District, we can promote tourism and consumer engagement with established local businesses in downtown. This amendment aligns with goal number 3 by increasing our housing stock and providing housing alternatives for traveling professionals and tourists. There is a notable absence of hotel and lodging options throughout Reidsville. Travelers are going to adjacent communities such as Eden, Greensboro, and Danville to find lodging accommodations. Short-term rentals may also serve as temporary transitional housing alternatives to local residents. For these reasons, the planning staff feels that this text amendment aligns with the city's goal for revitalization and growth, making businesses and development opportunities more attractive to investors and citizens alike. The planning staff recommends adoption of this proposed text amendment.
And I would like to elaborate just a little bit to give you some context of where this is coming from. So staff is petitioning for this text amendment. We are basing our petition on not only community feedback that we've received from the public, but direction that we've received from City Council. We've brought this to them in our different meetings to discuss potentially do we want to allow Airbnbs. That's what this is for, is primarily Airbnbs. There are Airbnbs currently operating unpermitted in City of Reidsville limits. There's, I believe, 5 that are active on the Airbnb website. They're located both in and around the downtown area, but then also through our established residential districts, for example, over along Sherwood. I believe there's one over there. So we've received feedback that this is necessary. We're all aware that there's not very many hotels or motels here in Reidsville. It's proven in other communities that Airbnbs and short-term rentals both serve as Claudia mentioned, transitional housing for people who may be starting a new phase in their life. Maybe they sold their house, they're looking for something else, and in the meantime they need accommodation. But also for tourism. And we've really in the last year or two pushed the revitalization of downtown, bringing tourists into Reidsville for different attractions and events. And we've repeatedly heard the complaint that there's nowhere to stay. So that's why staff is pursuing this. We also wanted to, make you aware of where these regulations that we're proposing came from. So a lot of the local or regional municipalities such as Eden, they don't have explicit guidelines for short-term rentals. We did have to reach out a little bit further and look at some of the large municipalities in the state. So we looked at Greensboro, that was the closest. We've looked at Winston, we looked at Raleigh, we even looked at Charlotte. These standards that have been presented are mirroring what you see in Raleigh. I feel like Raleigh's standards were both strict enough as in preventing like boarding situations. We've encountered those here before, but lenient enough that it would allow somebody to come in and capitalize on our existing structures as short-term rentals. So that's where these standards are coming from. In our discussions with council, it was suggested that we increase the number of units or that percentage cap for units that can be used for short-term rental from what was originally proposed, which was a 25% cap. So we have increased that to 50%. So to give you some perspective, it's 50% or 8 units, whichever is greater. If you had an 8-unit complex, the entire complex could be short-term rental. If you have a complex such as those on Lawndale or Weddington Place, for example, up to 50% of the complex could be short-term rental. So 216 units at Weddington Place, 108 of those could potentially be short-term rental. That's where those numbers are coming from. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you, or if you have questions specific to Claudia, she can answer them. We did collaborate on this report, so we're happy to take those questions at this time.
Question, I guess coming back from being the old fire marshal, alternate heating sources.
Mm-hmm.
How does this, I know it says, fire and building code, smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detecting equipment,
Mm-hmm.
but alternate heating sources, what are we looking there? Are we looking at you know, if somebody comes in there and wants to put a portable electric heater in or something like this?
Well, I think that would, again, like you referenced, have to fall in line with what the fire code is.
Okay.
In most cases where we have instances of that, we're unaware that that's going on until we receive a complaint about something. We do periodic inspections of certain commercial structures. I don't know for certain how that extends into residential. That would be a question that maybe the fire marshal or a building code administrator could answer better than I could. But at the time of issuance of the zoning permit, it would have to meet the standards for a residential unit. So whatever that is, HVAC, running water, electricity, it would have to meet building code and fire code at the time of when the permit was issued. And whatever happens violation-wise after that would be pursued as a violation.
How often, once it's been approved, how often is there a inspection scheduled for a walkthrough just to be sure that everything's there? Or is it going to be a complaint issued before the building inspectors would go back or whatever, or fire inspectors would go back to walk through to make sure that everything met the original permitting and everything like that?
Certainly, and that's a valid concern. So speaking again to the inspection process, the city doesn't conduct inspections of residential properties unless we receive a complaint, and whether that's a complaint from a tenant or, you know, a more general complaint, anonymous complaints. A lot of them are anonymous complaints. We would treat this no different than like a home occupation, and we do not conduct inspections for compliance for home occupations without a complaint. So it would remain complaint driven. This would in essence be an extension of a home occupation type permit.
You saying that by right, they can put one in a neighborhood?
Yes, well, yeah, an Airbnb or a short-term rental of sorts would be able to go into a neighborhood. I don't know how familiar you are with Airbnbs, if you've ever stayed in one, but typically it is a residential setting. It will be an apartment or a home that someone is turning around, be it the owner or a management group, and renting that out to somebody to come and stay for a period of typically no more than 30 days. We did not explicitly include that language in here because we do not want to prevent people who are going to use it as transitional housing from staying there longer than that. So in that aspect, we were thinking of your traveling nurses. They're often on assignment for much longer than 30 days.
I don't think that's going to be popular with anybody in any neighborhood.
Well,
downtown, I don't got no problem with it.
Certainly.
But you had a thing last year where people were renting out rooms on your street, and they were all kinds of complaints. I mean, parking was an issue, and I mean,
and that was a boarding house situation.
What's the difference?
The difference is a boarding house rents out rooms, and the property owner resides on site for the boarding house. Airbnb is not the rental of rooms; it's the rental of the unit, so the entire property.
So this is kind of like when the ACC teams come to Greensboro. A lot of people will rent their house for a week and they move out and go someplace else and stay.
Very, very similar to you renting a beach house.
Yes.
You want to go to Reidsville and you want to stay on the ocean front. So you're going to rent somebody's personal property, their beach house. You're renting it for a short term, and it is in effect a short-term rental. Whether it's listed on Airbnb, Vrbo, or some other management site, it's the exact same concept. You're renting it for a weekend or a week or a month, and you're staying in someone else's residential accommodation for the duration of your trip.
All right, I got a couple of questions. Going to point number 2 in your analysis.
Yep.
This means no parties?
No parties.
No parties.
No special events or gathering, and that is to maintain the integrity of the residential neighborhood, both visually, so the gathering of vehicles, as Mr. Towns referenced, but also noise, light pollution, things of that nature.
So I couldn't, if I was renting your Airbnb and I'm in town, I couldn't have family over for a dinner or a holiday dinner, say Christmas coming up. So, because you said gatherings too.
I wouldn't extend it to like a residential dinner setting, but if
Okay.
you were hosting a large dinner party, I would say that falls in the scope of this, where you're having a large number of guests coming. It is not just for the purpose of sharing a meal.
Okay, how's your number going to be? I mean, are you going to say if you have more than 10 people? It's not gonna be there, you can have up to 10 people as guests for the dinner, or?
We're not discriminating based on a number of guests. Some families are larger than others. And so for that reason, we didn't include a number. We don't want to prevent anybody from being able to take advantage of this opportunity since we are so limited on lodging, options throughout the city. And to go back to the point that we are complaint driven. So we would be made aware more than likely, as you saw last year with the Airbnb that was operating, or maybe 2 years ago on Lawsonville Avenue. They were in town for the A&T homecoming, and we received a complaint from a citizen because of the noise and the traffic and the fact that they were out on the lawn, having a good time. So we are complaint driven. Staff is not going out looking to find someone or find a violation, as we are with all of our ordinances and rules, even with our nuisances. Staff's not out hunting for problems, and we did not want to restrict the number of tenants, essentially, that could reside there, because that might restrict a large family. But it would be based on a complaint, as everything else is.
You are aware that will open up that's open for interpretation, and that could create some problems for you, for police,
We've had those discussions, yeah, and that's where staff's interpretation would come into play. If we received a complaint, we sent out a staff member, be it Ms. Moore or myself, or we send out a code compliance officer, and they can visually confirm the complaint that we've received, then we would take action, corrective action.
Of course, parties usually will be over with by then.
And that's a possibility.
I think you're opening up a can of worms, having it in residential areas. Like I said, if you want to do something uptown, then the police are right there. If it's in a neighborhood, the whole neighborhood gets roused up when the flashing lights all shows up. So I think it's opening up a can of worms in residential. I don't have a problem in uptown.
I certainly understand those concerns. Staff opted to include it in residential again because that's typically where you see Airbnbs. There are some in commercial districts. I stayed in one recently in Boone that was above a commercial use downstairs, and it was an apartment upstairs. But more than often, you're going to find them in residential districts. It's where they fit the most.
Most of these are houses in residential
Most of these are
areas.
houses. Sometimes you're going to run into that issue with parties, but generally speaking, we've had 5 operating under our nose here for who knows how long, and we've never received but 1 complaint.
I just think that wording, like, I can see special events or gatherings, like Mr. Fab said, how do you determine the number? Like, if it's under 10, am I good, or is it over 10?
Well, I don't think we're looking at it from a numbers perspective.
Right.
We're looking at it from an activities perspective. So if we go out there again and we hear the music, we
Right.
see the cars obstructing the right of way, we see people on
Okay,
the
so
lawn dancing and being, a nuisance to their neighbors, then that is a party or a gathering of sorts.
So if we're inside being quiet, then we're good.
If it's a group of people playing a board game and having dinner with their family, that in our perspective is not constituting a violation of a gathering or a party or a special event. And the special events language is more targeted at people who want to host weddings,
Right.
Large birthday parties. You may even run into like bachelorette parties and bachelor parties where people are renting it out and you have large groups of people gathering for a special event. That's more what that language is targeted at. And the gatherings is getting more at the parties, a family that might be there on vacation and the first 5 days of their trip they were quiet and inside, and on that 6th day they decided to throw up a lawn party and it's disrupting the surrounding neighborhood. So that's why that language is vague, because a party could also be interpreted differently. Me grilling out and playing some lawn games with my friends, but we get a little rowdy, that might not be a party.
Right.
to
So
some
I just
people.
last year I went to, there's an Airbnb in Milton. And I went there for a woman that was celebrating her 100th birthday. Of course, we didn't get
Rowdy.
rowdy, but it was like a lot of people there. And there's people sitting on the lawn, drinking, but not, not disrupting anything like that. So I was just thinking about.
Certainly,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it would have to be a contextual situation where we would
Absolutely.
look at specifically what's going on.
Okay.
Are you out there partying,
Right.
or are you all sitting
'Cause we
out
don't want
around
it.
your
Right.
bonfire? Are you all out grilling
That's right.
and being well-behaved citizens, or is it a frat party?
Most neighborhoods with associations wouldn't tolerate that anyway, would
That's what I'm thinking.
And they're welcome to incorporate a policy into their homeowners association that prevents this.
But
There's
you
nothing that
know,
says they
neighborhood
can't.
watch neighborhood watch groups or two are not going to put up with stuff like that.
Right.
And then they can submit a formal complaint and we can
Yeah, but
investigate
my
it.
question is, if this happens on Saturday night and you get a complaint on Monday morning,
We could still issue a violation. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean we can go and stop the activity now. And if it's to an extent where it's creating a nuisance, you can always reach out to the police department. If people are being unruly, the noise is in excess, that's an issue where you can reach out to the police department. But as far as follow-up for a violation, just because we receive a complaint on a Saturday or Sunday doesn't mean we're not going to pursue it. Staff would still pursue it. Monday morning when we got in, we'd send that letter, we'd let them know, we'd revoke their permit if that's the case. There are measures to make sure it doesn't happen again. We might not always be active on the weekend, considering most of our staff and our code enforcement staff is Monday through Friday. But we do have measures to yeah.
So, I got more questions.
Yep.
First question is, being that we don't have a policy now, what happens at a B&B when you've got issues? Nothing? Does the city have no tools other than
No, we have tools.
whatever your traditional law enforcement is?
Well, no, we have tools. So the way that we handled the issue on Lawsonville when we found out that there was an Airbnb operating there, we had to receive a complaint. Again, we are complaint driven. We're not going out and stalking Airbnb's website to find Airbnbs and going out and shutting them down proactively. We're complaint driven as we are with everything. When we received that complaint, we went out, we issued them a notice that this cannot happen. And from my understanding, the house sold shortly after that. They stopped operating the Airbnb and the house sold. So we did let them know that they did not have any sort of approvals to do what they're doing and that our recourse would be a zoning violation. We can issue civil penalties with the zoning violation of $100 a day for every day that the zoning violation continues to exist. So we do have recourse to pursue not only permitted uses that violate our ordinance, but unpermitted uses that violate the ordinance.
And then second, back to the hotel stuff. What is the city doing to actively attract hotels and other lodging?
So I can't speak to what activities the economic development team is currently pursuing to try to get hotels and lodgers here. Business follows infrastructure and housing, and I think hotels would be very similar in the sense that as we see the development of the units that we have in the works over the next 2 to 5 years, those 2,000 prospective units, we're going to see companies, perhaps a Hilton or something similar, begin to show interest in the area. I know there are some developers, and I won't give specifics about locations or whom, but there are individuals who have claimed in recent months that they are looking to bring a hotel here. So that's really on the developer side to acquire those properties, prepare them for that type of development, and to find that interest. But economic development knows that there's a need for hotels and for alternative
I was going to say
housing.
that's what we really need.
Yeah. So I can't speak to what economic development for the city is doing, but I know it's on their radar. I know they've made some efforts, but I just can't speak to what those specifically are.
I do agree with staff. I think the short-term rentals is definitely needed until we do, get some hotels, whatever in here, because we don't have anywhere for people to stay.
And these regulations, let's just hypothetically say it's adopted.
Yeah.
You recommend it, council adopts it. These regulations we decide are not strict enough. It's nothing to do a text amendment to make them stricter, to add more language, to tweak that language. If you want to make a recommendation that some of the language is changed tonight, we can present your recommendation to council. We will present the report staff has prepared and our recommendation as well, but we'll pass on the knowledge of whatever recommendation or inclusions or exclusions that you would like to see, and then council can have the opportunity to consider those equally at their meeting next month. Or excuse me, this will actually go in February. We're going to hold it till February. So.
Has there been any talk about people actually developing these things in the downtown area?
There has been some interest, significant interest actually. A lot of the units that are above some of our commercial spaces people want to see those be residential. And it might not necessarily be for short-term use, but they do want to see them residential right now. And I think it brings in a good business opportunity for some of these building owners who have a business downstairs and they can't come up with a good use for the upstairs, to be able to make a profit or to make a use or provide the community with something that we're currently lacking in these spaces that are sitting vacant, that are dilapidated and currently, for the most part, being used for storage.
I got no problem with that. But to put people that have paid $300,000 or $400,000 for a house next door to the dude that's gonna be running this, and you never know what's coming in there, and neither do the guy that's renting it. I got a big problem with that. I think I would recommend that it be just in the commercial areas, not in residential areas.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely take that feedback and share it with City Council when we bring this to them. The other caveat there is by including the required log of tenants, if there is a specific individual that poses a problem that we see renting repeatedly in our area, staff would be able to get that information to potentially take action to prevent them from being able to rent these different short-term rentals.
So if we pass this, city council passes this, does this mean that if you're unlicensed now, you're operating against the law?
That is correct.
So they're going to have to now register?
Yes. They will have to
And-
come into compliance. The state law, we
And they'll have to
can't,
come into compliance?
we can't use the term registry because we're not allowed to maintain a registry of short-term rentals. You can reference a case out of Wilmington where that was an issue, but they will have to obtain the permit and come into compliance with these standards. And that is where potentially staff would have an opportunity to not necessarily inspect, but maybe visit a property and provide guidance to someone that's currently operating one of these. And that process would be the same as any other violation process.
And
We would,
then let's say a complaint is driven on an
permitted.
unpermitted,
Yeah.
thank you, B&B, at that point, you have to shut them down?
Yes, so
Y'all will shut them down
that's the
and fine-
violation
and fine them.
process.
All right, so this is giving y'all some tools that frankly put, if we don't do something, you may have more difficulty closing down a B&B in the residential area.
I would say the recourse would be the same. We can issue a violation now. Under this ordinance, we'd be able to issue a violation. But it's giving us a little bit more teeth because we have something to reference. We have the standards in writing. It's not just you're unpermitted because this is not allowed. It's now you're unpermitted because you're not meeting standards 1 through 7. These are the reasons, and you have to have this permit. So it gives us a little bit more material to reference, but the process is the same. We could go through that process now. We just don't have as much strength in the ordinance or standards to reference. But yes, the zoning violation process would be the route we would take.
If this is approved by council, and these 5 places that you're saying that we got now operating illegally, how long after this is approved have they got to come in compliance?
So
Are
we
you
would,
gonna shut them down right then?
No.
Are you gonna give them 30 days or 6 months?
So-
Or if you give them so much time and then they come back to the council, and say, well, I've got this, but I haven't been able to do this, can you give me another 60 or 90 days?
No,
And just
sir.
keep dragging it out like I've seen it over the years on
No,
certain
sir.
things.
No, sir. So the zoning violation process is outlined in our ordinance, and it would be a 30-day notice to take corrective action. And then following that, if it's a nuisance-related issue, it's 10 days. So we do have a very strict, in some sense, timeline for remediation of these issues. And then at that point is when the civil penalties would come into play.
Now, what we're voting on tonight, though, is whether to send this thing as written to council.
Well, you're making a recommendation of whether council approves or denies, and I will.
As written.
As written, and I will include any changes, amendments that you'd like to make, whether that's an inclusion or an exclusion, or if you just want to change some of the numbers that we referenced, we can include that in the report that's presented to council. But we, as staff, will still present it as originally presented with the caveat that you either approved or recommended for approval or recommended for denial with the stipulations that you'd prefer to include, as we do with every text amendment. It always goes to council with your recommendation, and if you choose to make any changes to the recommendation, we make note of those, but it is presented as staff has prepared it.
I think this no more than 50% or 8 dwelling units, whichever's greater, I think that's a lot.
Which one did you say?
The item 3, where multi-unit dwellings. I mean, do I want to really turn an apartment complex to mostly short-term rentals?
It was originally based on the referenced ordinance from Raleigh, 25% and I believe 4 units, 4 or 6 units. And based on the direction that we've received from council, they were comfortable upping that to the 50 and 8. But we can revisit that if it's one of the recommendations that you would like to make tonight.
Yeah, I mean,
Are there any other cities our size? I know you said Eden doesn't have anything, but you looked at Raleigh, you looked at Greensboro, you looked at Charlotte. Did you look at any other cities our size to see what they're doing?
We did, yes. We looked at several other cities. We looked at everything in Rockingham County. We looked at counties. None of them have explicit standards. The ones that we did find, and I apologize that I don't have a list of those in front of me here, the ones that we did find just allowed them without standard. It would just say allowed by right in their use table or in their ordinance. Short-term rentals are allowed here, here, and here, more often than not in the residential districts by right with no additional standard.
By right part that bothers me. If they want to apply for it and come convince us that it's good, but otherwise in residential, I'm 100% against it.
I just have a comment. I am familiar with the Lawsonville situation, and in my familiarity with that situation was horrific when it happened. But I will say in that particular situation, as you was talking about, there is not necessarily a immediate remedy, perhaps, with the exception of calling our law enforcement out. But in that situation, it was rectified very quickly. In that situation, there was revenue actually being made from that particular house from further investigation, I'm told. And that, so it went away. And it went away fairly quickly, I will say that. But I guess the concern there is in the real time of it. For the neighbors in that community, you have a lot of elderly people. So in the real time of it, I mean, that could be something that would have to be figured out. But I can say that once, from what I understand, complaint was made, and as you said, they were contacted and it was done.
Immediately so,
Immediately.
yes. I was involved with that.
It was an immediate resolve.
When we found out about it it may have been a Monday after that weekend or the very next business day, we sent someone out there physically to make contact, but we also sent a letter and it ceased immediately. We did not have further problems with that property.
so should we then add to this text amendment where it is forbidden to have B&Bs? I mean, do we want something to show up in a non-conforming commercial building?
We can certainly have language that says that, but just as in every other text amendment to include a use in a district, it's implied by only allowing it in residential and central business that it's not allowed anywhere else. But if it would make the board and ultimately council feel more comfortable, we can certainly allow language to be included that says Airbnbs are explicitly prohibited from our industrial districts, which is Industrial 1 and Industrial 2, light and heavy industrial, and Industrial 3, which is specific just to the Youth Development Center, as well as our higher traffic business areas such as general business and highway business and neighborhood business, to keep them just downtown. If that would appease the board, we can include that language.
I want to keep them out of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Joe, but
Most Airbnbs are in the residential neighborhoods.
I guess if she specifically says central business, if you put it that way, then what she's saying is that since it doesn't say residential, then it's excluded, but,
And-
you know, most of these B&Bs are in
Ones we have
residential.
currently, they're in residential.
They're in residential
neighborhoods.
districts, and as I
Trust me,
mentioned.
I don't want a repeat of what happened on my street, but that
Yeah.
sounds like that was something that was.
Totally separate
that was
situation.
illegal going on.
Yep, that was a totally separate situation that violated our standards for a boarding house. And a boarding house is generally treated very differently from the Airbnbs. Occasionally, I've stayed in an Airbnb where it's like an in-law suite type situation where it's like a suite above the garage or something, and the property owner does reside on site. But the majority of Airbnbs are not going to be occupied by the owner. They're going to be for rent the majority of the year, or the entire year in some instances, for the general public. So I'm happy to take any further questions that you may have. I feel like there's a little bit of a split, decision here. You're welcome to discuss amongst yourselves. Staff is going to take the information that we've received from you into consideration and incorporate that into our report as it is presented to council, which would be concerns about residential and concerns about the 50% or 8 units. Is there anything else that we'd like to include in that?
Could we, and this is just a thought throwing it out, since we're trying to could we maybe just start out with the downtown business district, and if that works well, then we can kind of expand out?
I could certainly
Is
present
that
that.
possible?
I could present that recommendation to council as well with the other two, along with the concerns from Mr. Towns about residential and the comment from Mr. Thompson about the unit cap. We could certainly
Yeah.
present maybe a
What would you do with people already in
graduated
it?
implementation. If we did a graduated implementation, that would effectively put them out of compliance. So you would be losing the 5 Airbnbs that we do have that provide accommodation currently, that have not been
What kind of
thus
tax
far
money are we
issued.
drawing off of those?
So we are supposed to collect, what is the language here? Occupancy taxes. I cannot speak to whether or not those have been paid, but if they're operating through Airbnb, legitimately through Airbnb, those taxes are being paid.
What is our occupancy tax?
I don't know what that percentage is, but I could get that for you from finance, or you could reach out to our finance director to get that information. I don't know what that tax rate is.
And you said those 5 homes are listed on the Airbnb website?
They are. If you
So
pull
they
up
probably are paying those
Airbnbs
taxes.
on Reidsville,
Okay.
or in Reidsville, you can find, last time we checked, which was about a month ago, there were 5 operating. And we've been checking periodically.
Right.
This first came to staff several months ago, and we've taken a lot of time to do the research, to explore Airbnb and Vrbo and other short-term rental sites and platforms to see what's out there. You have a lot that operate all throughout Rockingham County. Some of them that are not in residential areas, that are in agricultural areas, they have the opportunity to not only be an accommodation, a lodging accommodation, but to be a business. And they bring, both business revenue and taxes into the jurisdiction that way as well. So it's a dual-edged sword.
And just for point of information, Airbnb has their regulations also.
Certainly.
And also, if you look at you just put in Reidsville, North Carolina, or Rockingham County, North Carolina, it will come up and you will see what the ratings are. And if you look at that, you'll see that what we have here is favorable, just from what I've seen there.
That is what staff has seen as well. And like I said, we haven't received any complaints about any of these that have been in operation except for the one on Lawsonville. And that was a somewhat particular incident where it was a large party that kind of got out of hand a little bit. But these other ones, from our knowledge and from what we've gathered from the community and from discussions with council, have not been an issue. We haven't had police presence at any of these sites. We haven't had complaints coming into staff. And they're being used. If you look at them on Airbnb, they are booked out. So they are
It's a
being
huge
used.
concern for me, putting people out of business.
Certainly. So I think this is a step towards providing those accommodations, getting people here. We want them to spend their money in Reidsville. They've got to have somewhere to lay their head at night. So they can stay in Greensboro and spend the night in Greensboro and spend their money in Greensboro, or they can come to a short-term rental here and spend their money here. That was staff's perspective on it. And again, from what we've received from the community and the business owners that are very interested in this opportunity. Any further questions or concerns or information that you'd like us to incorporate going forward? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Yes, ma'am.
Just technically. Just say full.
So it's going to council whether we approve it or disapprove it with the caveats that we've added, or is that only if we approve it?
No, it goes to council regardless, just as every text amendment you've heard, it goes to council for consideration. They are just informed that you either recommended to deny based on these standards, or you recommended to approve based on these standards. And then I incorporate your comments from tonight, if there are any, being you had several tonight, will be incorporated into the presentation at council.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak for the text amendment? If not, is there anyone here that wants to speak against the text amendment? Seeing none? Okay. Could you come to the podium, please? Thank you. And state your name and address.
My name is James Motley, address 1324 US 29 Business, Reidsville. It's not so much an opposition to or support of, but rather a question. I have explored some Airbnb issues in Raleigh, and the question is, if I recall correctly, one of the conditions was that that Airbnb required the owner to be in that facility. Is that what we're talking about here or not?
No, sir. So from our research in the standards that's in the Raleigh ordinance, we did not see where it indicated the owner had to be on site. Again, that's more in line with like a boarding house situation or a bed and breakfast situation, and our ordinance does reflect that standard for those two uses. For Airbnb specifically, or short-term rentals as it's more accurately represented, that was not a standard that we saw reflected, and if it was, then we were amiss. But we didn't just look at Raleigh. We looked at several other jurisdictions, and we did not see that standard presented.
I may have overlooked or confused the two, but the point is this. If, in fact, we approve this, and we certainly need the housing for visitors here, the question is whether or not there's going to be any real problem. Clarify this for me. The difference between a boarding house regulation and the bed and breakfast.
Okay, so a bed and breakfast, the only similarity there is that the property owner is on site. And I wish I had those definitions in front of me to be more verbatim for you. But in a boarding house situation, there is a percentage cap of the space that can be rented. I can't quote you that percentage cap, but there is a percentage cap. And then it's room by room, essentially for your sleeping accommodation, and then there are communal spaces. With the bed and breakfast, it's a business that's being ran. It's not just a sleeping accommodation, it's a business. Specifically, the only one we have that I'm aware of off the top of my head was the Shea Lindsay, and it's no longer operating, I believe. But they don't have a cap on the space that the tenants can take up.
So they can occupy 100% of that facility based upon it being a bed and breakfast.
With the exception of the space that the property owner occupies, because they do have to be on site.
They do have to be on site.
But the entire facility is, in essence, the bed and breakfast.
Okay, I understand.
But the short-term rentals, the owner not on site, this is like the beach house at the beach or the cabin up in the mountains.
You may have some owners who do reside on site who have, a separate entrance to maybe a separate portion of their home. Again, I've stayed in those type of accommodations as well, where it's almost like an apartment attachment situation. Or it might be someone who owns a duplex and lives in one half of the duplex and rents the other half. So there are situations where you may have an owner on site, but there are certainly situations where the owner might not even live in Reidsville. They may live elsewhere. That's just a possibility. If they have for example, a family home here that's been, in their possession for a long time, generations, what have you, they live elsewhere because they work elsewhere, but they want to be able to maintain the home and have income to do so. So they choose to rent it as a short-term rental.
Understood.
That would be the best example I could provide you of a situation where someone does not live here, but maintains a short-term rental.
Understood. In closing, I would say I have the same concern that you have, Mr. Roach, and that is with people who are complying, who are currently generating revenue for the community, providing housing for the community. What was suggested, some sort of graded or tiered adjustment that would basically run them out of business. I have concern about that also, so I need to express that. Okay?
Yeah, I don't see anything in this text document that it can't be worked out.
And to be honest, it's probably going to take a little bit of trial and error. This is not something you see a lot of ordinance standards for within Rockingham County, which is why we reached out to places like Raleigh and Greensboro, Winston and Charlotte, because they have thoroughly reviewed, statutorily supported standards in their ordinance for these type of establishments. It's proven that it's worked. There are always going to be complaints. There are always going to be people who violate the standards, but we have policies and procedures in place to take action against them, corrective action if that happens. We try our best to make it immediate, and over a weekend, it might not be on Saturday or Sunday that we can get out there, but that Monday morning we'll take care of it, just like we did for the incident on Lawsonville. And that's staff's promise. That's our responsibility to the community, is to take that action as quickly as possible to prevent another violation from happening. But there will be instances that, for lack of a better phrase, slip through the cracks. There are always things that happen that we're not made aware of, since we do operate on a complaint-driven basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that there might be some concern about that phrase that I've used multiple times now, the complaint-driven basis. That's at the directive of council. So we will continue to operate on a complaint-driven basis. If it's life safety, we will take action ourselves. But if it is otherwise, it's a complaint-driven basis. And that is in an effort to be friendly with the citizens and the community. We don't want to take an aggressive approach. We're not trying to shut anyone down, as Mr. Roach said. We're not trying to put anyone out of business. We're not concerned with slapping someone with a fine. We're concerned with compliance. We want you to operate your business. We just want you to be in compliance.
So they're operating an illegal business right now.
We have not received complaint.
But we're putting, with these illegal places, we don't know if they've got smoke detectors, we don't know if they've got this, that is what this ordinance or what this is saying that they've got to have. So basically, we are putting people's lives at stake. If there's a fire in there, how are they going to get out? How are they going to be able to see? Emergency lighting, exit lights, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers. So technically, these 5 places that you're saying we've got right now that's operating illegally, then we're putting, if they've got one person in there at night, then they have put that person's life in danger if there's a fire during the middle of the night.
My response to that would be that the decision to operate on a complaint-driven basis, if we wanted to change that, would need to be brought to council for consideration. Currently, we're operating within the standards that council has set for us. If it's an issue where there's a complaint, we would investigate that, but we have to receive a complaint. So we're going to operate within the standards that we've been provided. As frustrating as that might seem, we don't conduct inspections for home occupations now. We don't conduct residential home inspections for fire safety, not regularly. I'm sure when a home is built, that happens, but not periodically.
But this becomes basically a commercial.
It becomes
property.
a home occupation type use. Yes, it's a privately owned residence in a residential setting or permitted as a dwelling or residential use. It is being used in essence the same way home occupation is being used.
So these 5 that are here now, they're not technically illegal. There's nothing against the law that says they can't do this. There's just no regulation in the city of Reidsville that forces them to do the smoke detectors, the fire alarms, because we don't have anything in place for them to go off of. Is that-
Illegal might be a harsh way of putting it. They are not in compliance. We don't have short-term rentals as a use in the table, and staff has always interpreted it that if it is not included, it is prohibited. That's generally speaking how we've always looked at these sort of uses.
And the city's getting nothing off of it.
I'm sorry?
The city is not gaining anything by their business. I mean, then you're not getting the taxes, are you?
Well, potentially we are. If they're operating legitimately through Airbnb, then we should be receiving that tax. Because Airbnb has policies in place for the collection of the payment and the distribution of all of that. Airbnb stays are taxed. There is tax tacked on right at the end, and it's spread out to the community and as it should be.
And they're all listed on that website, so
They are.
9 times out of 10, that tax is getting paid.
Yeah, and I mean, if
Okay.
they weren't, then that's a compliance issue
That's
with
right.
Airbnb.
Right.
But we should be, as they currently stand, even though they are not in compliance with our ordinance, they should be in compliance with any state or federal
Right.
law in regard to taxes. So we would be, in theory, receiving those occupancy taxes. I don't work in the finance department, and I can't pull a record to show that we are, but we could investigate that with the finance department between now and the council meeting.
But we're also making the assumption that these folks are all going through Airbnb. That
That's how they're booking.
there could be some others out there that are not even going through Airbnb,
I'm
and you may not be.
Yeah, I'm referencing Airbnb because that's the most well-known, but we've looked at Verbo, the same ones on Airbnb, a couple of them are listed on Verbo. There's a couple property management groups around here that run rentals. I can't speak to whether or not they're running them as short-term rentals, but there are plenty of property management groups that are running rentals. I know some of them do short-term lease options, whether that's 6 months, month to month. And if that's how we're gonna classify a short-term rental, is that not short-term rental?
Yep.
Doing a month-to-month lease? So you have this activity already occurring in your community. It's just under a different guise and a different name. It's currently happening.
And that's correct, to your point there. You can rent month to month, and that is
In a lot
general
of places.
statute base, which would be ordinance based, automatically coming into the general statute. So these things are already happening. Airbnb is reputable. I would say by business standard, Airbnb and Vrbo are reputable. And you probably do have some that are, as you say, outside of those Airbnb and
Platforms.
platforms. So I think we're kind of circling, but overall, I would say it's already happening. This puts it in perspective with the guidelines that have been set here, and it's kind of like one of those things with the Lawsonville incident, isolated, rectified very quickly. Moving forward, as you said, that has not happened with the ones that we have, that we know about. And if you look at the ratings on those, favorable, and again, Airbnb, it is, and Vrbo, they are, I would think, business standard good. So those are my thoughts there.
I just think we're supposed to represent all the citizens of Reidsville. And I can't think of anybody in my neighborhood that's gonna love having a short-term rental next door or.
And they may already have one and just don't know it.
Yeah.
And to your point, I certainly understand. We want to represent the community as a whole. And that's where council comes into play, and that's where you come into play by making a recommendation. You've been appointed to this board for a number of reasons, but likely because of your connection and your interest in your community and preserving what your community has, but also growing your community and realizing that Reidsville is not where it was in the 80s or the early 2000s, and recognizing that if we want to grow and we want to be on par with the communities that have a Target, that have a Chick-fil-A, that have a Cracker Barrel, all of these businesses that we've repeatedly heard from not only your board, but the public that you'd like to see here, then we need to have the rooftops and the accommodations to support that, because those
Sure.
businesses don't come just because we ask them to come.
But a short-term renter don't count.
A short-term renter in per se does not count as far as a demographic population.
Exactly.
But it may count economically because they're spending their dollars.
That's right. So I know we've had discussion on this, and like you said, I think we're kind of circling at this point. Board discussion, sounds like we have had that discussion, so how do you all feel? Do you want to continue to discuss? Yeah. If not, does someone want to move on this recommendation?
Chairman, I move that we accept the recommendation given to us.
I think it's
Yeah, there should be a specific one, but it's pretty much in line with what you said.
Okay.
That'll suffice. That's just for convenience.
Okay. Right here.
So I move that we recommend the proposed amendment, docket number T 2025-07 and T 2025-05.
Just the one on Airbnbs only, please, for this first.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm going to correct that, and I move that we accept the proposal for T 2025-05.
Okay. It has been moved and properly second. All in favor? Raise your right hand. Any opposers? Okay.
I can't go with it the way it's written.
All right. All right, the recommendation has been moved. All right, that's it.
Thank you very much.
It's recommended for.
Recommended for council.
4 to 2. There's plenty of notes there that should go to city
That's right.
council so they can see that it was a
Yes, sir. Those will be
lively
incorporated.
spirited debate.
Those will be
Absolutely.
incorporated, expressed in the minutes.
Yeah.
We always express the count, so it will be explicitly stated who voted for and who voted against, and then I will include the comments that were provided by each of you in regard to potentially altering this language.
Thank you, Drew and Claudia. Thank you. Next item for consideration is the consideration of text amendment request to amend Article 8, Section 8A of the Reidsville Subdivision Regulations to introduce new standards for curb and gutter stormwater control. Docket number T 2025-07. Drew.
Thank you again. So I want to preface this before I jump into my report, which I believe you may have already read. This came about from council. Again, there was some interest expressed to us that maybe our standards needed to be looked at. So that's where this is coming from. We have evaluated our standards. We've researched other standards. We've researched the state standard and alternative methods. So that's what I'm going to present to you today, is a middle ground of alternative methods based on what we currently have as opposed to a non-existent policy. Okay, so staff have been asked to review and amend the City of Reidsville's current curb and gutter requirements located in the Reidsville Subdivision Regulation. This is unique. Usually you see text amendments from the zoning ordinance. This one is coming from our subdivision regulation. As development activity increases, particularly activity related to residential subdivisions and housing, it is essential that our policies prioritize community well-being and environmental compliance. Our current curb and gutter requirement states that all new residential subdivisions located both within the corporate limit and the extraterritorial jurisdiction of Reidsville must have proper curb and gutter installed by the developer at the time of development. Currently, there are no exceptions to this requirement for residential subdivisions. Curb and gutter is not explicitly identified for requirement in commercial developments in commercial districts within our subdivision regulations. To encourage development and increase our local housing stock, staff has researched, as I noted, curb and gutter policies for other municipalities, both regionally and broader, and we make the following recommendations for amendment. Number 1, this is a density exception for curb and gutter. It is presented in 2 parts. The first bullet point is single-family development. So if there is a subdivision created where the single-family unit count is less than 6 an acre, they would be exempt from traditional curb and gutter requirement. If they are more than 6 units an acre, they must comply with traditional curb and gutter requirements. This is going to be more in line with what you see kind of in the county. County doesn't require curb and gutter, but that is because there's such low density. It might be a mile between neighbors. It might be hundreds of feet between neighbors. And at a density of less than 6 units, I'll tell you, none of our developments that we've approved recently are that low. So, you know, keep that in mind, take that with a grain of salt. But if there were to be developments at that rate, they would be exempt. Those that are above 6 would have to comply. Mirrored that for townhomes and multifamily, if it's less than 8, they do not have to comply. If it's more than 8, they do have to comply. So exact same thing there. Number 2, we are providing an exemption from the curb and gutter requirement. It may be given for all new developments located in our Troublesome Creek watershed. This is to further alleviate the impervious surface restraint and preserve the city's watershed acreage allowance. So before I finish up with that bullet point, let me give you an example. In Troublesome Creek watershed, you can develop with a special intensity allocation up to 70% of a parcel. So if that's a 100-acre parcel, you can develop 70 acres. What happens, with our impervious surface calculation is that you have residential development coming. Currently, we require curb and gutter. It is eating up our impervious surface allowance, which would potentially prevent a large industry or a large chain, be it Target, another Walmart, something of that nature, or another business coming in and locating within that watershed. Once that allocation is gone, it is gone. We cannot develop any more impervious in the Troublesome Creek watershed. So we will have to stop developing to the southwest around the lakes. And that's some of the most desirable, in what I've heard, residential housing that is coming in the next few years on the west side and the southwest around our lakes. It's beautiful out there. To continue on that, we would require, in lieu of curb and gutter, vegetated ditch and culvert to be installed. We would not allow underground piping along the driveways and the yards. So that is a caveat there. And that is to prevent damage to those pipes, since this would be at the expense of the property owner to maintain ditch lines, unless the HOA maintained the ditch line. City of Reidsville does not currently maintain ditch lines. So we would not be out there maintaining those. We have had several instances where property owners have put in drainage pipe under driveway and along the right-of-way for stormwater flow, where they have collapsed or failed. So to prevent that from happening, you could do culvert or you could do vegetated ditch, but no piping underground to prevent that collapse. The third option is the planning director, so myself, or the city engineers would be given discretionary authority to waive curb and gutter requirements for any residential development when presented with a stormwater management plan developed and approved by an engineer, a licensed engineer for the project, that indicates curb and gutter is not required, or that an alternative stormwater conveyance method is acceptable for this development. So I'm not an engineer. If I get documentation from an engineer that states a different method will meet the state requirement and will satisfy our regulations, then we will accept it. That is where staff has some discretion there. If we can be presented with that documentation, we're happy to take the licensed engineer's word for it. There has been some concern potentially that you might have an engineer that is doing a favor for a friend. And if that is the case and they present documentation that is falsified, there are methods through the licensing board, certification board, whatever you call it, for engineers where we could report them for that. We have engineers on staff that would do an evaluation, and if something was amiss, we would have those conversations to correct it. But there is ultimately a path through their agency to prevent them from being able to do that sort of thing again in the future. The fourth caveat here is that new curb and gutter will be required within existing subdivision developments that do not meet any of the provided exemptions. So they don't meet a density exemption, they don't meet a watershed exemption, and they were unable or did not provide an engineered document stating that it's not required. We're giving them 3 ways to not have to do curb and gutter. If they can't provide those items, curb and gutter is required, and where existing curb and gutter infrastructure exists within a existing development, that is key there, within an existing development, tie-on will be required. And I can give you an example of that as well. So Park Place, you have a phase 1 that's completed. I believe it has valley curb, so it's a type of curb and gutter conveyance method. A phase 2 potentially could be developed. Let's say that phase 2 has vegetated ditch. Phase 3 gets built. Phase 3 has curb and gutter. You are going to have runoff from phase 1 and phase 3 towards the low spots where there is not the same type of infrastructure in place to provide that stormwater conveyance. We see it routinely throughout the city where we receive complaints from property owners who have neighbors at a slightly higher elevation or neighbors with more impervious surface than they have, where runoff is crossing their property boundary and flooding. And that's what would happen if you did not tie on to, potentially what would happen if you didn't tie on to existing infrastructure as you phase out these developments. So this is not saying a new development by right has to have curb and gutter. They have exemptions. They have ways around it. And even for phased development, if they can meet one of those exemptions within reason, then they can get out of it too. But developments that do not meet one of those exemptions where it is existing are going to have it. So staff recommends that you approve or recommend for approval the adoption of this proposed text amendment. Staff also asks that the planning board consider the interest of the community in alignment with the long-term growth goals of Reidsville. If we want to see growth, like you've seen in Greensboro, I know everybody hates it when we say Greensboro. We don't want to be Greensboro, but we want the business Greensboro has. We want the housing opportunities Greensboro has. And you've got to have the infrastructure to support those things. So that's our presentation on curb and gutter. If you have questions, staff's more than willing to take questions. This has gone through a discussion at council. This is the version that council discussed and advised us to take before you tonight.
Well, the purpose of this stormwater stuff is to move the surface water in as environmentally a favorable way as you can. And that's a ditch and culverts. The reason that is that the water that runs off the street into those ditches is filtered by the grass and absorption before it reaches a water body or a creek or something. You don't get that with curb and gutter. So the environmentally best way is without curb and gutter. And if you've got a subdivision, I don't know, I'm just going up. If you've got a subdivision and the curb and gutter ends right here and they're gonna build on, and this one flows east and this one flows west, why would you try to make this one tie into the curb and gutter? Why couldn't you go west with the ditch and culverts?
Well, that would be a site-specific example that I can't speak to based on the standards that were presented, but that gets back to the fact that they could provide an engineered stormwater management plan or document that states alternative methods are appropriate. We're requiring tie-in when they can't meet an exemption. So if they can prove via engineered documentation that that is certainly the case, and staff reviews it, and our city engineers review it, and we are in agreement with that, and it is in compliance with the rest of this ordinance, then certainly that would be an opportunity for them to do something other than curb and gutter. That's what the whole policy is centered around, is providing alternative methods to alleviate some of the costs. We've heard time and time again, and I won't quote numbers because I haven't done the math, but it's expensive to do curb and gutter. We've also heard from the community that curb and gutter is desirable. It's aesthetically pleasing. Our ordinance also requires a sidewalk. So if there's a sidewalk but no curb and gutter, your sidewalks running through a ditch, through the grass. You know, so there are some aesthetic,
All that gets back to your engineering drawing.
well, we require it though. We require the sidewalk. So there are some aesthetic things that are also in play. You know, someone who's purchasing a $250,000, $300,000, $400,000 home in the city limits with city amenities and utilities probably is going to expect curb and gutter. And from what we've received feedback from the community, from the citizens, is that yes, that's in fact what they would expect is curb and gutter.
I've read something from the School of Government that says that decisions, talking about administrative decisions, he said that you and the engineer have a discretionary thing. Administrative decisions are made in the implementation, administration, and enforcement of development regulations that involve the determination of facts.
Well, we're not determining the
I'm
facts.
not through yet. The aesthetics is not a fact, it's an opinion. In the application, the objective standards set forth in the chapter of local government development regulators, these are sometimes referred to as ministerial decisions. And it says, for instance, determine whether they've been met. And this is not a definition of objective, but for instances that involve discretion, which is, that's what you're asking for, discretion here.
As we currently have.
Yes. You're asking for discretion to make this call on curb and gutter. For instances that involve discretion, then either a quasi-judicial decision or a legislative decision must be used. So that means this board has to approve it.
No, sir, you're interpreting that incorrectly. So a quasi-judicial or legislative decision, the review of a site plan to meet compliance with our standards is not a quasi or legislative decision. That is an internal administrative decision that is conducted by staff and TRC.
This came from the School of Government, and this is talking about administrative decisions that on big things like this.
This is not a legislative or quasi
I'm
decision.
just not sure you've got the authority to disapprove them or approve them.
We certainly do. Staff does have the discretionary authority to interpret and implement the policies that are adopted by council. And this in particular is an example of that. Currently, the way our curb and gutter policy is written and is accepted, we don't have any authority. But you also have no opportunity to deviate from that standard.
But the only people that can't get a waiver is an existing thing that's got curb and gutter.
If they don't meet a standard for
What
exemption.
standard?
The 3 presented standards for exemption.
So let me just clarify. So back to Park Place.
Yes.
You got phase 1 that's built. It's got curb and gutter right now.
Yep.
If they wanted to do a phase 2, what you're saying is that if an engineer comes back with drawings, renderings, and a report that says, for phase 2, we don't need to do curb and guttering because the water will flow appropriately and this will meet the environmental, this will be a better environmental situation.
Correct.
And what you're saying is because it meets number 2 on your list.
Yes, sir.
That upon review.
Upon
you know,
staff
you
review.
don't see anything that the engineer appears to have put that is totally bogus from what you can see at your end. You all will grant them the authority to not have to do curb and gutter.
That is
in that
correct.
subdivision.
Because in that instance, it's meeting an exception.
Okay.
So
Okay, but in number 4 here, it says if you've already got it in phase 1, like at Park Place, then it's this new development that's fixing to go, then the way I'm reading this is that they're required to tie on to the resisting curb and gutter.
no, that's an
See, why-
inaccurate reading.
I'm gonna tell you
That wasn't
that's-
in here
I'm
then.
gonna tell you that's how I read it too. I read it the same way that.
And I talked to a council member today to verify that my thought, And he agrees with that.
That is a misrepresentation of what is written. And we can go through it sentence by sentence, word by word, if we'd like to break it down a little bit further.
Drew, let's do that so
Yeah.
everybody is clear on what.
We'll start with number 4.
Okay.
So, new curb and gutter will be required within existing subdivision developments that do not meet any of the provided exemptions. So that is only if they do not meet a density exception, a watershed exception, or engineered documentation. Almost every development will be able to meet one of those, if I'm being honest with you. A large portion of our development is occurring in the Troublesome Creek watershed. It encompasses about 1/3 of the city. You know, the density, that's at the discretion of the developer if they want to meet that density requirement or exceed it. That's going to be up to their budgeting for the project, how much it costs them in materials and labor to develop that project, how much the land cost when they purchased it. And that will be a business decision on their part to decide at what density they want to develop. If they want that exception, they can't meet the watershed, the engineer disagrees, the curb and gutter is not required, they can always build a lower density. So we're providing outs through several avenues for developers to not have to do curb and gutter. We hear them, you know, when they say that it's a concern, that it's a financial strain. We've heard it from the local developers. We haven't necessarily heard it from any of the larger national or state developers, but we have heard it at the local level. And this is our attempt to provide not accommodation for that. So that first sentence again, new curb and gutter will be required within subdivision developments that do not meet any of the provided exemptions. And where existing curb and gutter infrastructure exists, so Park Place is what we're talking about, within current subdivision developments, tie-on will be required for any expansion. But again, that first sentence provides them an exemption. So if they can meet an exemption, then tie-on is not required.
You know how you can simplify the whole thing? Do away with 3 and 4, just go with 1 and 2. And that way, you're doing the same thing. If he comes in with a perfectly good engineer, professional engineer approved plan that says he can hook on.
Well, that's number 3 on the
No.
list.
Number 2 says
Number
exemptions from the curb and gutter requirement may be given for all new developments in the Troublesome Creek watershed to further alleviate impervious constraints.
Yeah, so that's the watershed restriction. That's not the one about the engineer providing documentation.
But if an engineer comes to you with an approved drawing, drawing that you can approve, why wouldn't it be covered under number 2?
Because currently we require it.
Troublesome watershed.
Currently we require it regardless. That's how the ordinance is currently written. So it can't just be implied that an engineer would produce a document stating it's not required, because our ordinance requires curb and gutter. So if we don't have language in there allowing that exemption, as it is currently, it would be applied that that is not an exemption.
Well, it's like he said, on number 4, you're hard and fast to get. You said you gotta do it.
If you can't meet an
I
exemption.
think number 4, as you know, as I've interpreted the same way that they had read it, if you've got 3 to 4 college-educated folks that have misinterpreted what you're trying to get at, I think you probably need to rewrite number 4 to be more clear that sentence 1, new curb and gutter will be required within subdivision developments that do not meet any of the provided exemptions, period. In addition, if a subdivision or development has existing curb and gutter, if no exemptions, none of the previous 3 exemptions apply, then curb and gutter is also required.
Yeah. So I mean, that's pretty much what's stated, but I think, yes, rewording
I
it
think you need to reword that.
might help. And this is the language that, again, through several iterations with council, was recommended be presented. So that's why it's been presented as such. This has been through review with council 3 times, and it's been reviewed with staff for the last 6 months.
I would advise city council, well, that the way they had that worded is opening to interpretation the other way. That's got us up in arms that, you know, that you're continuing to require curb and gutter, when in reality you're meaning that we shouldn't be requiring curb and gutter if they can provide one of those exceptions.
Yeah, we can certainly look at rewording it. That would be one approach to that. We could reword it. We could potentially break it into two if you wanted to have that first sentence be number 4 and have the second part of that be a number 5. But I think the intent there, as staff heard it from council and as staff has researched it, is to allow exemptions but require tie-in if they don't meet those exemptions. And we did want to have language in there that we are requiring tie-in if you don't meet the exemptions, again, because if it's not in there, it can be applied that you don't have to.
Well, you need to say in number 4 that he can apply for an exemption based on his engineering.
Well, it's in number 3.
I think that's where clearing that statement up will address Joe's concern.
Yeah, the exemptions referenced in number 4 are 1 through 3. 1 through 3 are the exemptions, and number 4 is the statement clarifying that an exemption is required to be alleviated of the curb and gutter requirement. Yeah.
Then the breakdown is probably going to be 1, 2, or 3 anyway.
Yeah, 1, 2, or 3 are the only exemptions. Yes.
That's going to cover almost everything, to be honest.
Pretty much.
I mean, short of, you know, I mean, basically, this covers current zones R20, R12.
It covers all districts.
And really, in reality, even down to R6, it can cover R6 as well.
This covers all districts, including commercial and industrial, because we do have certain residential uses that are allowed in those districts as well. You know, in essence, it could apply to every single type of development. A high-density apartment complex, probably not. Especially like Weddington Place that's just been built, that's not in Troublesome Creek watershed. It doesn't meet the density allowance. And at the time, I can't speak to what their engineering report said, but I believe it was recommended that curb and gutter be installed. Right. So you have instances like that where they're not going to be able to get an exemption, especially to the east and northeast side of the city.
Right.
So there are going to be still developments that require curb and gutter, and there are going to be engineers that look at this to say no. You know, you're going to have curb and gutter for what you're trying to do. Sure. I have yet to see an apartment complex that doesn't have proper curb and gutter for the amount of impervious surface that they have to drain. So I wouldn't say this is throwing curb and gutter out the window, and that's definitely not what staff wants. Staff wants to appease the community, both the developer and the citizen, as we've heard these complaints. We've tried to provide them with some exemptions that are outside of our discretionary review, but we're also including some discretionary review. If you don't want staff to have that discretionary review, it can always be reworded so that every instance of a deviation has to come before planning board and council. But what you're doing then is slowing the development process. It's been our effort to include staff review and some discretion on our part to speed that up and remove that red tape that we've heard the complaints about.
But that's what the School of Government says. It says it becomes a quasi-judicial, which is higher of the board.
Well, the quasi-judicial items are variances, so this board wouldn't hear this as a variance. It could be construed as a legislative decision, depending on if the site plan were tied to a conditional rezoning of some sort. But again, that's legislative, and that does come before the board. Just the review by TRC of a site plan is not a legislative decision. It is an administrative decision made by staff and made by the TRC committee, which is not just myself and Claudia, Ms. Moore. That is fire, that's PD, that's engineering, that's public works. So you have about 9 different people that serve on TRC who are providing educated feedback based on the standards, and we're applying those standards in our review. And that is fully within our right per the general statutes and per conversations that we've also had with the School of Government and our contacts.
We keep talking about an engineer. Do we go with the developer's engineer, which to me would be a conflict of interest? Or do we have our own engineer that would look, if developer's engineer says, no, you don't need it? Okay, to me, that's a conflict right there. So do we hire, or do we have a city engineer that's going to review this and then go that? Or do we go outside and we hire a third-party engineer to look at these plans and everything and then go with that?
So I touched on that a little bit in the beginning, and I may have glossed over that too quickly for y'all. But we currently do not have city engineers. Those positions are vacant. So we are contracted with McGill, and then we have a secondary contractor as well, that in the case that McGill is the engineer for the project, we can reach out to them in lieu of. So we can also take the perspective that if for whatever reason McGill was unable to determine or unable to review a stormwater policy or a plan for compliance, we can reach out to the state, to get their opinion, to see if it's in compliance with the state laws. And if we feel that there's been some sort of violation, some sort of, helping a friend out by developing a policy or a management plan, more accurately, that does not reflect those standards, that is cut in a corner somewhere, we have that opportunity to go to their licensing board, certifying board, and report them for that. That would be the proper channel, just like if a building inspector.
This also gives you the chance to say no as well.
Yes, it also gives us the chance to say no if we're unsure. But it's no different from reporting a contractor who did shoddy work that didn't meet the building code, or reporting an inspector for their license if they inspected something that didn't meet code and passed it anyways because it was their friend. There are avenues both legally that we can pursue as well as locally with our ordinance that we can pursue. And this is just giving us more, knives in the fire here to be able to tackle these issues. Because right now, I have no authority. If you come in and want to build something, you're putting curb and gutter in.
I don't think a developer that spent $20,000 on a site plan is going to give you something that's not accurate.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. We receive site plans that, we review with TRC, and we have to give ample feedback because it might meet a state standard, but it might not meet a local standard, or vice versa. We have yet to receive, in my experience here, a site plan that did not go through at least one iteration of review and then subsequent submittal for us to review. We have never received one that didn't have error.
I think we talked about that earlier this year, doing the UDO, training and all.
It's consistent, and it's not always substantial error.
Right.
Sometimes it's just within the purview of zoning. But there are conversations between the engineers. I've seen pipe size, outflows, valves, all sorts of different things, placements of hydrants, that, again, a licensed engineer prepared that document and mistakes were made. So there is that secondary review by our contracted engineering firm, and at some point when we hire an engineer, they will also review it. Right now, staff doesn't get in on that. It's just McGill that's reviewing it for engineering concerns.
Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you for answering all those questions, and I hope that the board has a little bit more clarity and on these.
So what I'm
amendments.
Hearing, just to be 100% sure what we're taking to council, I will reword number 4 for clarity, but not to change the content.
Right.
I'll reword number 4 for clarity. Are there any other revisions or omissions that need to be made, or inclusions that you're looking for in this regard that I could make note of? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anyone here to speak for the text amendment? Anyone to speak against? Okay, if not, I think the board has had discussion. Is there any more discussion among the board? If not, we will go ahead and move to accept or deny.
Madam Chairman, I will make a motion to recommend the proposed text amendment, which is excuse me. docket number T 2025-07 be approved with the stipulation that statement 4 be clarified for intent.
I second that.
It has been moved in second, okay. All in favor, show your right hand. Any opposers? Have the same right, okay. Motion carried. Thank you, Drew. Thank you so much. Good conversation. Thank you, and excellent presentation from both of you all.
I'm very happy to discuss this with anyone that wants to have further clarification. You know, you can come to my office. I have a lot of meetings, but if you call me ahead of time, we can schedule something. You can come in and we can talk about it. The reason we hosted the discussion forum with council a month or two ago was for the purpose of clarity. We're not trying to sneak anything past anybody, certainly not past this board, certainly not past the public or the developer. You know, but if you need further clarification on how we ended up at this rendition of the amendment, I'm more than happy to again walk through that timeline, how that happened, what that looks like, what research we've done. As I am with any text amendment or development application that comes before you. We can always talk about it one-on-one if you need further clarification.
Thank you so much, thank you. Director's report.
Okay, so, you know, it's the holiday times, it's been cold. We're wrapping up on a few big projects that we'll make note of. So Weddington Place Apartments is almost to their final inspection. I believe they have one more building to inspect and then some of the accessory structures. Claudia went out there today and inspected building 200 and they did pass. So we've been very pleased with the progress that they've made. We know that they're filling up quick. The developer who did this project is fantastic. His work speaks for him. He did the apartments over on Lawndale. So we're very pleased with that, and it's been moving along quickly. Staff has made accommodations to make sure that it keeps trucking. In the face of everything that's gone on these last few months with staff turnover and the weather and all those things. So we're very pleased that that is coming to a close, hopefully at the beginning of the year sometime. So that's fantastic. We have several single-family homes, one-offs and two-offs that are being developed throughout the city. There are 4 on Grooms Road that have just finished construction, and 2 of them have already sold. So we do
I've
have
seen a
that
lot of
need.
those. There's 2 in my neighborhood. Yep.
You see that the need's there, and it's they're hitting the market and they're not on that long. So as far as businesses go, there have been some inquiries recently that staff's received about the Popeyes. I do not know when development of that site will begin. There was a plat recorded for the subdivision of that out parcel. They have received all approvals from staff on the zoning side. I don't know if there's some sort of structural review that's still ongoing with inspections and permitting, but from our end of things, they are good to begin site work. Whether it's grading or, you know, putting in that driveway, utilities, but as far as the structure itself, I'm not sure where they're at in the review process. But, you know, there's been no activity, so some people have questioned, are they still coming? So what's going on? We're of the impression that they are still coming, it just might be moving a little slow. Otherwise, there's a few new businesses downtown and I am amiss with their names, but we have several new boutiques and a potential ice cream shop that's coming downtown. We have no permits for that yet, but you can see the signage in the storefront when you walk by. And a few other very interesting business ventures that are potentially coming in the next couple of months for downtown that we're working on behind the scenes. So I would be ear to the ground when it comes to downtown. There's a lot going on, and I think it's pretty exciting.
It is.
I deal with roses.
We want to talk
The
about the
Roses
mall?
Mall.
Is that what we're?
Yeah, let's talk about the mall.
It looks good.
So there's some limited information that I can share from what I've heard firsthand. I do not want to repeat anything that I've heard secondhand. So we'll stick with what I've been told firsthand and what I have documentation of. So on our end of things, I don't believe there's been any zoning permits for the change of ownership of the mall that have been pulled, nor for any new tenants, not at this time. That is not to say that there have not been conversations about tenants. That is not to say that they are not working on leases for tenants. But as of yet, we have not seen documentation of that. We have not received permit applications for that. What has been relayed to me by the inspections division and what I've seen myself, it looks like they're mostly doing cosmetic kind of cleanup work that doesn't require building permits. There was some work done to the roof, but it wasn't structural from my understanding. Mostly just cleanup work, getting it ready to be rehabbed. There is a temporary construction wall that's in there, but again, that's not something that needs to be permitted for. It's not permitted, it's not structural necessarily. It's just to divide off the space while they clean up that area that had kind of caved in on the left-hand side of Rose's. I have not heard that Rose's is leaving. So it would be my assumption they'd stay, but I have not heard one way or another. I do know that the Belk is excited about the rehab of the mall. That has come to me. I know some council members have spoken to the property owner and have some additional information that they've shared with the media. I don't feel comfortable speaking on that because it wasn't shared with me directly. And again, I have no documentation of that, but there are some potential retail, restaurant, possibly amusement opportunities that have been suggested for the mall. In regard to the apartments at the mall that you may have heard about, what staff has been made aware of that we have received a preliminary sketch for, and this was a while back, is for the Winn-Dixie site, for there to be some apartments there. So it would not be in the mall. I've heard rumors that it would be in the mall. It would not be in the mall or on top of the mall. As far as I know, the mall's not getting a top level. It's not getting a third or fourth floor. Not yet, anyways. But some great stuff going on there at the mall. We really appreciate it. I know the city, the citizens appreciate it. They want to see the mall brought back to kind of that glory day standard. I heard a lot about this peanut shack that I know nothing of. But some people are very excited, and staff's here to support that. We've got some changes and things that we're going to tweak in our ordinance and regulations to potentially make it easier for the mall to be rehabilitated and for it to be filled with new tenants. So that's really all I can share until we get further along in the process. But they are doing a fantastic job of cleaning it up. Progress with the demo of the Winn-Dixie, which they do have a demo permit for, is ongoing. You can see the big hole they knocked in the wall. I haven't been out there in a few days, but they've potentially torn down more. So it's moving fast, and the timeline that I've heard is very quick.
Good.
Without giving you a specific date, very fast.
Just get them to pave the parking lot there in the mall.
I think that will have to happen.
It's adversely affects my ATM that's up there, so, don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's got to happen is the parking lot situation. I haven't heard anything about that, but I know personally from driving through there, you hit a pothole every 3 or 4 feet, and you're driving like you're inebriated trying to get through there and dodge those potholes.
Looking for the nearest Michelin.
But yes, there is activity going on at the mall that we are aware of. Staff's in complete support of it. We're very happy that it has been purchased. And the person that has purchased it is very promising. So.
Well, I can definitely say the public is excited. Yeah.
We echo that excitement.
Sure.
Quick question, and I'm thinking the property owner's doing this, the old Libby Hills, I noticed they put a roof on it. Was that somebody looking at that building, or is it just the property owner doing it to protect his building? Or do you know anything about that?
So, I don't know about the roof, and I don't know whom would have done the roof, but I do know several months, probably now, it's been months back, and I did bring this up in my report then at that time that it had changed hands, or was in the process of changing hands, and a permit was issued for a Latin American, Hispanic grocer and butcher shop with a bakery for fresh goods. So it was going to be a tienda, and they have not, as far as I know, begun work on that, but that was the last thing that was permitted to be there. I know there's always cars out there, so I don't know.
I think the rental places
I was gonna say.
parking lot too.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some come across, you can tell where they, instead of coming out into the road, they went across the grass and up the hill to Libby Hill. So
Certainly, yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
I think they're using that for parking also.
Yeah, some overflow parking there, but yeah, that was the last thing that was permitted. I'm not sure about the roof. I would assume the owner did it. I don't think a random person or a tenant would have
Yeah, I
done
don't think
it.
so either. So I didn't know if somebody had bought it and was fixing that, but started with a roof and then going from there, or if it was still owned by the original people and They just put a roof on it to protect it.
I mean, it would be our hope that the permitted business that the
Absolutely.
grocer, the bakery, and the butcher's shop would come to fruition. But it could be a potential other owner or business venture that we're just not aware of yet. But that was the last thing that was permitted there.
Planning board comments. Thank you, Drew, for your report. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on down, and would someone move to adjourn this
Motion to
meeting?
adjourn.
Well, let me finish. All right, would someone move to, it's already been moved and seconded, so all in favor? All right, thank you, good night. All right.